Infertile Amish man paid $1 for orphan twins. What he did next shocked everybody. In a dusty trading post, a quiet farmer pulls out a single silver dollar, and the crowd roars with laughter. Everyone knows this man, infertile, mocked, forgotten. But when he claims 2 ragged orphan girls as his daughters, the West itself seems to hold its breath. At first, the town sneers. How could a barren man raise children on his own? Yet inside his lantern-lit home, a fire of love begins to burn. Just as hope flickers to life, danger strikes. A sheriff rides in with orders to take the girls away, and hidden in one little locket lies a secret that could change everything. Snow falls, church bells toll. Will this man of faith prove the world wrong and keep the only family he's ever known? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The trading post's wooden floor creaked beneath Ephraim's boots as he led the twins toward the door. Whispers and snickers followed them, cutting through the stuffy air like knife blades. Susanna, the fiercer of the two, glared back at the crowd with eyes that sparked defiance. Her smaller sister Mary Beth huddled close, shoulders hunched against the weight of so many staring eyes. "Ain't natural," someone muttered. "An Amish man with no wife, taking in strays?" Ephraim's weathered hands tightened on the girl's shoulders, gentle but firm. The silver dollar he'd paid still gleamed on the counter behind them, catching the late afternoon light that filtered through dust-streaked windows. County Agent Horace Plimpton's nasal voice rang out. "Mr. Stoltzfus, surely you understand the impropriety of this arrangement." He adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles with precise fingers. "A single man, living alone, taking custody of 2 young girls? The railroad orphan system has proper channels." "The hammer fell," Ephraim said quietly, his Pennsylvania Dutch accent soft but clear. "The sale is done." The agent's face pinched with displeasure. "Nevertheless, I must insist." "Good day to thee," Ephraim cut him off, something he rarely did to any man. But he'd seen the fear in Mary Beth's eyes when the agent spoke of proper channels, watched Susanna's small fingers clutch at her sister's ragged sleeve. Outside, the November wind bit sharp and cold. Ephraim's wagon waited, the stack of fresh-cut beams he'd sold still leaving the scent of pine in the air. He helped the girls up onto the wooden seat, noting how light they were, how their bones pressed against thin fabric. The drive home was silent, save for the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional snort from his draft horse. The twins sat rigid, pressed together like sparrows in a storm. Susanna kept one arm around Mary Beth, who couldn't seem to stop shivering despite the heavy wool blanket Ephraim had wrapped around them both. His farm came into view just as the sun began to set. A simple cabin with a barn, chicken coop, and fenced pasture. Smoke curled from the stone chimney where he'd banked the morning's fire. To his eyes, it had always seemed a lonely place. Now, watching the girls take in their new home, he saw it through their gaze. Solid walls, warm hearth, the promise of shelter. Inside, lamplight cast soft shadows across plain furnishings, a sturdy table, straight-backed chairs, clean swept floors. The twins stood just inside the door, still clutching each other, their eyes darting to the windows where the first snow of the season had begun to fall in lazy swirls. Ephraim moved slowly, lighting more lamps, adding wood to the fire. He set out 3 tin cups and filled them with warm milk from that morning's milking. Then, following the habit of a lifetime, he knelt beside his chair. The girls startled at this, taking a step back. But Ephraim simply bowed his head, clasped his calloused hands, and spoke to his God in the plain way he always had. "Lord," he prayed, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart, I thank thee for bringing these children to my door. Though I be unworthy, having failed to give Anna the family she desired, I ask thy blessing on this household. Guide my hands and heart in raising these daughters thou hast sent." He paused, swallowing hard. "And Lord, thank thee for answering an old man's prayers, even when he had lost hope of hearing thy reply." When he looked up, the twins still stood frozen, but something had shifted in their stance. Mary Beth's eyes shone with unshed tears, while Susanna's fierce expression had softened just slightly at the edges. Ephraim stood, his knees creaking like the floorboards. "You are my daughters now," he said simply, meeting their gazes. "This is your home, for as long as you wish it." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft pat of snowflakes against the window glass. Neither girl spoke, but Mary Beth's shivering had finally stilled. Susanna's chin lifted, a question burning in her eyes. But whatever she might have asked was lost in the growing darkness outside and the warm glow of the lamps within. Through the window, snow continued to fall, each flake a new beginning, each moment pregnant with possibility. In that kitchen, in that silence, something fragile and precious was taking root, like the first tender shoot of spring wheat pushing through frozen soil toward the light. Dawn crept over the Colorado hills, painting the frost-covered fields in shades of pink and gold. Ephraim had been up since before first light, stoking the fire and heating water in the large copper basin. He set it near the hearth, along with 2 clean towels and a bar of simple lye soap. The twins descended the ladder from the loft, their borrowed nightshirts hanging loose on their thin frames. Mary Beth's eyes were heavy with sleep, but Susanna remained alert, watchful as always. "Time to wash up," Ephraim said gently, gesturing to the steaming basin. He turned his back to give them privacy, busying himself with morning chores until they finished. From a cedar chest in the corner, he withdrew 2 plain dresses that had belonged to his Anna. The fabric was sturdy, the stitching neat and strong, though the brown wool showed signs of careful mending. "These might be a mite big," he said, "but they'll keep you warm." Mary Beth reached for the dress with trembling fingers, clutching it to her chest like a treasure. But Susanna crossed her arms, chin jutting forward. "I won't wear dead people's clothes." "Susanna," Mary Beth whispered, horrified. Ephraim kept his voice steady. "These were my wife's. She would have wanted them put to good use." After several tense moments, Susanna snatched the dress, though her eyes remained stormy. Once dressed, the girls looked different, less like wild creatures and more like the daughters Ephraim had dreamed of having with Anna. The morning air was crisp, as Ephraim hitched his horse to the buggy. The twins sat close together on the leather seat, their borrowed dresses neat, but their faces still wary. As they clip-clopped into town, Ephraim noticed how Mary Beth pressed against his side, while Susanna held herself rigid, staring straight ahead. Main Street was already busy with morning traffic. As their buggy passed, conversations stopped. Heads turned. Near the general store, Mrs. Whitaker bent close to Mrs. Peterson, their words carrying clearly in the cold air. "That's the barren one. Couldn't have children of his own, so he bought some." Ephraim's shoulders stiffened, but he kept his eyes forward. Beside him, Susanna's small hands clenched into fists. At the bakery, warm air scented with yeast and cinnamon enveloped them. Mr. Schmidt looked up from his counter, flour dusting his apron. His eyebrows rose at the sight of the twins. "Good morning, friend," Ephraim said clearly. "I'd like to present my daughters, Susanna and Mary Beth." The words felt strange but right on his tongue. "We've come for some bread." Mr. Schmidt's expression softened as he wrapped up 2 fresh loaves. He added a pair of sugar cookies, winking at the girls. Mary Beth offered a shy smile, while Susanna tucked hers into her pocket without a word. Back at the farm, Ephraim showed them around their new home. In the barn, his milk cow Betsy chewed her cud peacefully. "Would you like to learn to milk?" he asked. Mary Beth nodded eagerly, but Susanna hung back in the doorway. The chicken coop came next, where speckled hens pecked at scattered corn. "Gathering eggs will be one of your chores," he explained, demonstrating how to reach carefully under the warm bodies. "Mind you don't startle them." In the workshop attached to the barn, half-finished beams waited for his attention. The twins watched as he ran his hand along the smooth wood. "The Lord gives us work to do," he said quietly. "Even small hands can help carry kindling and feed chickens." That evening, the kerosene lamp cast a warm glow over their supper table. The twins ate hungrily, bread, stew, and the last of autumn's preserved apples. When Ephraim bowed his head to pray, Mary Beth followed suit, but Susanna kept her head high, her spoon moving defiantly to her mouth. After the dishes were cleared, Ephraim led them up to the loft. He'd arranged clean quilts on his bed. He would sleep below by the fire until he could build proper beds for them. As they settled beneath the covers, he sat on the edge of the mattress. "The Lord is my shepherd," he began softly, reciting the 23rd Psalm. "I shall not want." Mary Beth's eyes drifted closed, her breathing growing even. But Susanna stayed awake, watching him with those fierce, questioning eyes. When he finished the psalm, she spoke. "Our ma used to pray too. Didn't help her none." Ephraim's heart ached at the bitterness in her young voice. As he climbed down the ladder, doubts crowded his mind. What did he know about raising children, let alone girls? What if the townsfolk were right? What if he was fooling himself, thinking he could be a father? The fire popped and sparked in the hearth. Above, he could hear the soft creaking of the bed as the twins settled. A long night stretched ahead, full of questions without answers. The next morning, Ephraim showed the twins how to braid rope in the barn. His weathered hands moved slowly, demonstrating the pattern. "Over, under, pull tight," he explained, watching as they tried to copy his movements. Mary Beth's small fingers worked carefully, her face scrunched in concentration. Though her first attempts were clumsy, she beamed when Ephraim nodded approval. Susanna, however, yanked the strands too hard, tangling them before throwing the rope aside. Later that day, in the warm kitchen, Ephraim taught them to knead bread dough. The familiar motions brought memories of Anna, teaching him years ago. Mary Beth pressed her palms into the soft dough, giggling at the flowery handprints on her apron. But Susanna stood apart, watching with arms crossed. When Ephraim turned to bank the stove's fire, he caught Susanna slipping pieces of bread into her dress pocket. His heart ached, recognizing the gesture of a child who had known hunger. He pretended not to notice, but left extra bread within easy reach. The second day followed much the same pattern. While Mary Beth grew more comfortable, helping to scatter corn for the chickens, Susanna remained distant. Ephraim found food hidden throughout the house, dried apple slices under her pillow, bread crusts wrapped in cloth beneath the stairs. On the third morning, as pale winter sunlight filtered through frost-covered windows, Ephraim was stoking the kitchen fire when he heard harsh coughing from above. The sound grew worse, followed by Mary Beth's frightened cry, "Susanna!" He rushed up the ladder to find Susanna collapsed on the floor, her face flushed with fever. Her thin body shook with each rattling cough. Without hesitation, Ephraim scooped her up, wrapping her in a quilt. "Hitch the horse," he told Mary Beth, who scrambled to obey. The bitter wind cut through their clothes as Ephraim lifted Susanna into the wagon. Mary Beth huddled close to her sister as they set off toward town, the wagon wheels crunching through fresh snow. Dr. Miller's office was warm and smelled of herbs and liniment. The physician listened to Susanna's chest with his stethoscope, his expression growing grave. "Winter chills settled deep in her lungs," he said, measuring dark liquid into a bottle. "Without proper warmth, nourishing food, and medicine, she won't last till spring." Ephraim's throat tightened as Dr. Miller named his price for the medicine. The cost would take nearly all he had earned from his last delivery of beams. But looking at Susanna's pale face, there was no choice to make. The ride home was silent, except for Susanna's labored breathing. Ephraim's mind raced, calculating how many more beams he would need to cut and shape to earn enough for more medicine. The work would mean long hours in the cold workshop, but he would find a way. That evening, he coaxed both girls to eat bowls of hot soup, watching closely as Susanna managed only a few spoonfuls. Her cough seemed to worsen as night fell. In the loft, Ephraim tucked another quilt around her shivering form. "Dear Lord," he whispered, smoothing back her damp hair, "grant her strength." The kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows on the wall as he kept vigil, listening to her struggling breaths. Outside, the wind moaned through bare branches, promising more snow. Hours crept by. Ephraim moved between the loft and the kitchen, heating water for steam to ease Susanna's breathing. Each time he climbed the ladder, Mary Beth's worried eyes followed him. Near midnight, he heard Susanna whimper in her sleep. "Mama," she called softly, her voice thick with fever. "Mama, I'm cold." Ephraim's hands trembled as he tucked the quilts tighter. The lamp flickered, its light growing dim as the oil ran low. But he dared not let it go out, keeping watch as his youngest daughter fought for each breath. As he sat beside the bed, Ephraim's prayers continued, a steady stream of whispered words rising into the darkness. The night stretched endless before him, filled with the sound of Susanna's coughing and the weight of a father's fears. The snow fell in thick curtains as Ephraim guided his horse through the deepening drifts. His wagon creaked under the weight of freshly cut beams, each one representing hours of careful work in his frozen workshop. The early morning darkness pressed around him as he made his way toward town, hoping to trade his lumber for enough money to buy more medicine. His thoughts drifted to Susanna, her cough still harsh despite the first bottle of medicine. Mary Beth had taken to warming cloths by the fire to lay across her sister's chest, her small face pinched with worry. The sight only strengthened Ephraim's resolve to provide, no matter the cost. At the lumber yard, his shoulders ached as he unloaded each heavy beam. The yardmaster counted out fewer coins than usual, shaking his head at the winter-slowed business. Ephraim accepted without complaint, knowing every penny would help keep Susanna breathing easier. The icy roads made each trip treacherous. Twice his wagon wheels slipped, nearly sending his precious cargo into the ditches. But Ephraim pressed on, making 3 deliveries before the week's end. Each night, he returned home with hands cracked from cold, yet grateful for whatever he'd earned. Sunday morning dawned clear and bitter. Ephraim helped the girls into their warmest dresses, wrapping them in wool shawls for the buggy ride to church. Inside the simple wooden building, oil lamps cast a gentle glow as the congregation gathered. But beneath the peaceful surface, whispers rippled like wind through dry grass. "Those poor creatures," one woman murmured, glancing at the twins. "A single man cannot possibly—" "No proper home for young girls," another agreed. Ephraim kept his eyes forward, leading the twins to a back pew. They sang hymns, their breath visible in the cold air. Mary Beth's sweet voice rose clear, while Susanna struggled between coughs. After the service, as families filed out into the snow, Deacon Samuel Hurst approached. His stern face was lined with concern beneath his broad-brimmed hat. "Brother Stoltzfus," the deacon said quietly. "A word, if you please." They stepped aside, snow crunching beneath their boots. The deacon's words fell like ice between them. "The county agent will be checking come spring. Fail, and they'll go on the orphan train." Ephraim's heart clenched, but he bowed his head in proper humility. "I understand, Deacon." "This is no small matter," Deacon Hurst continued. "The reputation of our community rests upon proper order. These children must be raised according to our ways." "Yeah, they will be," Ephraim assured him, though the warning pierced deep. That evening, as wind rattled the window panes, Ephraim served a simple supper of bread and soup. The twins sat close together, sharing warmth. He cleared his throat, knowing he must prepare them for what lay ahead. "Children," he began carefully, stirring his soup, "there is something we must discuss." Two pairs of eyes lifted to his face. Mary Beth's questioning, Susanna's suddenly wary. "Come spring, some strangers will visit us. They will—" He searched for gentle words. "They will test if I can keep you properly." Susanna's spoon clattered into her bowl. "No," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You promised we could stay." Mary Beth grabbed his sleeve with both hands, her fingers trembling. "Please don't let them take us," she whispered. Ephraim reached across the table, covering their small hands with his weathered one. "Listen well," he said firmly. "The Lord placed you in my care, and I will not let go. We are family now." The wind howled outside, rattling the door in its frame. Ephraim rose and added wood to the fire, its warmth pushing back the darkness. When he turned, both girls had left their seats to stand close beside him. "Come," he said softly, settling into his chair by the hearth. They needed no second invitation, climbing onto his lap as they had begun doing these past weeks. Susanna's forehead still felt warm with fever, but her tears had stopped. Together they huddled near the flames, a fragile circle of hope against the cold. Ephraim wrapped his arms around them, feeling their gradual relaxation as the fire's warmth seeped into their bones. Outside, snow continued to fall, but in this moment they were sheltered. They were together. "Tell us again," Mary Beth murmured, "about how you found us." "Ah," Ephraim smiled, though his heart ached. "I walked into the trading post that day, and there you were. 2 precious souls the Lord had chosen just for me." Susanna's hand crept into his, and he squeezed it gently. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls of their small home. Though challenges lay ahead, Ephraim held his daughters close, silently renewing his vow to keep them safe, whatever the cost. A week of gentle snowfall transformed Ephraim's farm into a blanket of white. The morning sun sparkled across untouched drifts as he worked in his barn, carefully shaping wooden planks into a simple sled. His hands, rough from years of carpentry, moved with practiced skill as he fashioned runners and a sturdy seat. Every so often, he glanced toward the farmhouse where the twins were sweeping the floor, their small figures visible through the window. When the sled was complete, Ephraim called the girls outside. They emerged bundled in warm shawls, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. Susanna eyed the sled with cautious interest, while Mary Beth clapped her mittened hands. "What is it for?" Susanna asked, touching the smooth wood. "For riding," Ephraim explained, pulling the sled toward a gentle slope near the farm. "Like this." He positioned the sled at the hill's crest and patted the seat. "Who wants to try first?" Mary Beth stepped forward eagerly, but Susanna held her back. "I will test it," she declared, her protective instinct showing. Ephraim helped her settle onto the wooden seat, gave gentle instructions, then carefully pushed the sled forward. Susanna's startled gasp turned into a delighted squeal as she glided down the slope. When she reached the bottom safely, her face glowed with excitement. "Mary Beth, you must try." For the next hour, laughter rang across the snowy field as Ephraim guided the girls down the hill again and again. Even Susanna's cough seemed lighter in the clean winter air. The sound of their joy made his heart swell, reminding him of dreams long forgotten. Later that afternoon, savory smells filled the kitchen as Mary Beth stood on a wooden stool beside Ephraim, carefully stirring a pot of soup. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she mimicked his steady, stirring motion. Meanwhile, Susanna crept around them, sneaking pinches of bread dough when she thought no one was looking. Ephraim pretended not to notice, hiding his smile as flour dusted her nose. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a loud moo from outside. Through the window, they spotted neighbor Miller's brown cow wandering near their fence line. Ephraim pulled on his coat and gestured to the girls. "Would you like to help return her home?" Both girls nodded eagerly, rushing to don their boots and shawls. Together they trudged through the snow, approaching the cow slowly, as Ephraim had taught them. Mary Beth spoke softly to the animal, while Susanna and Ephraim guided it from behind. The cow followed docilely as they led her back to Miller's farm, the girls giggling whenever she stopped to sniff their pockets for treats. Evening found them gathered around the warm stove, bowls of steaming soup before them. The kitchen glowed with lamplight as they ate, and Ephraim felt a gentle peace settle over their small family. After the dishes were cleared, the girls settled close to him by the fire. "Tell us a story," Mary Beth requested, her eyes bright. "A true one." Ephraim was quiet for a moment, then began softly. "I once knew a woman named Anna who could sing sweeter than any bird in spring." The twins leaned forward, captivated, as he described his late wife's gentle spirit and the way she would hum while working in their garden. He told them about her skill with a needle, how she could turn the plainest cloth into something beautiful. His voice grew tender as he remembered her dream of filling their home with children. "She would have loved you both," he finished quietly, watching the firelight play across their faces. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling of wood in the stove. Then Susanna, who had been studying him intently, spoke in a whisper that seemed to carry all her heart's uncertainty. "Can we call you Da?" Ephraim's eyes filled with tears he could not hide. His throat tightened with emotion as he answered, "Ya, little ones, I would be honored." Mary Beth immediately wrapped her arms around his neck, while Susanna pressed close to his side. He held them both, marveling at how these precious girls had transformed his lonely house into a home filled with love. When bedtime came, Ephraim tucked both girls into their shared bed, pulling the quilts up snugly around them. Standing beside them in the soft lamplight, he began to hum one of Anna's favorite hymns. The gentle melody filled the room as the girls' eyes grew heavy. "Good night, Da," Mary Beth murmured sleepily. "Good night, Da," Susanna echoed, her usual defenses softened by trust and tiredness. Ephraim's heart felt full enough to burst as he continued, humming, watching over his daughters until they drifted into peaceful sleep. The name they had given him felt like a precious gift, one he would treasure always. The Colorado winter tightened its grip as December deepened. Snow piled in drifts against Ephraim's farmhouse, but inside, warmth and learning flourished. Each morning began with Ephraim teaching the girls to kneel beside their beds, showing them how to fold their hands in simple prayer. Mary Beth took to it naturally, her soft voice echoing his words, while Susanna watched with cautious interest, her lips moving silently. In the kitchen, Ephraim set up a corner for plain sewing lessons. He brought out Anna's old sewing basket, carefully showing the twins how to thread needles and make straight stitches. Mary Beth pricked her fingers often but persisted, determined to master each new skill. Susanna's stitches were uneven, yet her face glowed when Ephraim praised her efforts. "Well done," he would say, examining their work. "Each stitch brings improvement." Outside, wrapped warmly against the cold, Ephraim taught them to split kindling. He demonstrated the proper stance, how to hold the hatchet safely, showing them where to strike the wood. The girls watched intently, their breath visible in the frosty air. "Like this, Da?" Susanna asked, carefully positioning a small piece of wood. "Yeah, exactly so," he answered, guiding her hands. "Mind the angle." Their progress came in fits and starts. Some days brought triumph, a perfectly sewn seam or a cleanly split piece of kindling. Other days brought frustration and tears. Through it all, Ephraim remained patient, praising their smallest successes until their confidence grew. One evening, as wind whistled outside their snug home, Ephraim gathered the girls near the lamplight. He opened his worn Bible, its pages soft from years of use. The twins settled close, drawn by his gentle voice as he read stories of faith and courage. Mary Beth leaned against his shoulder, while Susanna sat cross-legged, her eyes fixed on the flickering lamp flame. When the week drew to a close, they needed supplies. Ephraim hitched the wagon early, helping the girls climb aboard. The journey to town was cold but peaceful, the wagon wheels crunching through fresh snow. At the general store, Ephraim helped the girls down, their boots leaving small prints in the white powder. Inside, warmth from the pot-bellied stove welcomed them. Ephraim began selecting their necessities: flour, sugar, thread. The girls stayed close, examining the colorful display of candy sticks behind glass. The quiet morning shattered when a man stumbled in, reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. The drunkard's bloodshot eyes fixed on Ephraim and the twins. "Well, if it ain't the Amish man and his bought children," he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Working them hard, are you? That why you got them so cheap?" Susanna's face flushed red. She spun around, her small fists clenched. "He does not! He's our Da, and he—" The man took a threatening step forward, hand raised. "Mind your tongue, girl, or step back." Ephraim's quiet voice carried steel as he moved between the man and his daughters. Though he stood peaceful, his presence filled the doorway. "You will not threaten my children?" The store fell silent. Ephraim's calm strength seemed to grow as he continued. "These are my daughters. I will protect them as any father must. Now please, go about your business and leave us to ours." The drunkard wavered, then dropped his hand. Muttering, he turned away. The twins pressed close to Ephraim's sides as he paid for their goods, his movements unhurried and deliberate. The wagon ride home was quiet, broken only by the gentle clip-clop of hooves and the creak of wheels. Snow began to fall in lazy spirals. Finally, Susanna's small voice broke the silence. "You stood for us," she whispered, her words carrying wonder. Ephraim glanced at his daughters, both watching him with trust shining in their eyes. His answer came from his heart, simple and true. "That is what fathers do." The twins exchanged glances, then huddled closer on the wagon seat. Together they continued home through the softly falling snow, their small family bound tighter by love and protection demonstrated in the face of cruelty. December brought the promise of Christmas to the Colorado settlement. Frost painted delicate patterns on window panes, and evergreen boughs decorated doorways. In Ephraim's farmhouse, excitement stirred as news spread of the upcoming Christmas Eve service at the small wooden church. "Please, Da, may we go?" Mary Beth asked one evening as they sat around the warm stove. Her eyes sparkled with hope, while Susanna nodded eagerly beside her. Ephraim's hands stilled on the wooden dolls he had been carefully carving in secret. His heart tightened, remembering the whispers and stares that had followed them since that day at the trading post. The thought of facing the entire congregation made his shoulders tense. "The service will be simple," he said slowly, studying their hopeful faces. "Plain folk don't celebrate with fancy decorations or worldly gifts." "We don't mind," Susanna insisted. "Mother used to take us to church on Christmas." Her voice softened at the memory. Mary Beth touched his arm gently. "Please, we want to sing the songs again." Ephraim's resistance melted at their earnest pleading. "Yeah, we will go," he agreed quietly, and their joyful hugs warmed his heart more than the stove's heat ever could. On Christmas Eve, snow dusted the ground like sugar as Ephraim helped the girls into the wagon. He had dressed them in their best plain dresses, their hair neatly braided beneath white prayer caps. The small church glowed with lamplight as they approached, its windows bright against the darkening sky. Ephraim's hands tightened on the reins as he helped the twins down. Taking a deep breath, he opened the heavy wooden door. Warmth and lamplight spilled out, along with the immediate rise of whispers. The congregation turned to stare at the unlikely family, the solitary Amish widower and his adopted daughters. Ephraim guided the girls to a back pew, keeping his eyes forward as the whispers followed them. He could feel the weight of judgment, the silent questions about his fitness as a father. The twins pressed close to his sides, their small shoulders straight and proud despite the attention. The service began with scripture readings, the familiar words washing over them like a gentle stream. When time came for the hymns, the minister invited any who wished to share a song to step forward. A heavy silence fell. Then, to Ephraim's surprise, Susanna and Mary Beth squeezed his hand and stood. Their boots made soft sounds on the wooden floor as they walked to the front. The congregation stirred, curious and uncertain. The twins faced the gathering, their faces calm in the lamplight. Then their clear voices rose in perfect harmony, filling the small church with the pure notes of Silent Night, the song that Anna, Ephraim's beloved wife, had sung each Christmas Eve before her passing. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Their sweet voices soared to the rafters, carrying memories of Anna's gentle spirit. Ephraim clutched his hat to his chest, tears burning his eyes. The entire congregation sat transfixed as the twins sang verse after verse, their voices growing stronger with each line. Hardened ranchers dabbed at their eyes with rough handkerchiefs. Women sniffled quietly. Even the minister stood motionless, moved by the unexpected gift of song from these once unwanted children. As the last pure notes faded into silence, something shifted in the air. The previous whispers of judgment transformed into murmurs of appreciation. Several people nodded warmly to Ephraim as the twins returned to his side, their faces glowing with quiet joy. Later that night, back in their snug farmhouse, the twins sat expectantly at the kitchen table. Ephraim brought out 2 carefully wrapped packages, his hand slightly trembling with anticipation. "These are for you," he said softly, placing one before each girl. Their eyes widened as they unwrapped the simple gifts. In their hands lay 2 beautifully carved wooden dolls, each unique, crafted with loving attention to detail. Ephraim had worked on them in secret moments, pouring his heart into every careful cut and smooth curve. "They're beautiful," Mary Beth whispered, cradling her doll close. Susanna traced the tiny features with wondering fingers. "Did you make these yourself, Da?" Ephraim nodded, his heart full as he watched their delight. Outside, snow drifted silently past the windows, But inside their home, joy and love warmed the air. His daughter's song had touched hearts in the church, transforming mockery into acceptance. Now, watching them cherish his handmade gifts, he knew that God had blessed this unlikely family in ways he never could have imagined. The January morning dawned bitter cold, frost etching thick patterns across the farmhouse windows. Ephraim stood at his workbench, showing the twins how to sand wooden pegs for barn repairs. Mary Beth concentrated on her task, while Susanna hummed a hymn, their Christmas joy still warming the air. The sharp rap at the door shattered their peace. Ephraim opened it to find two stern-faced men on his porch. One wore a silver badge that caught the winter light, the county sheriff. Beside him stood a well-dressed stranger clutching a leather portfolio, his city boots spotless despite the muddy yard. "Mr. Stoltzfus," the stranger announced. "I'm Agent Harrison from the railroad company." He produced official-looking papers from his portfolio. "I'm here about the two girls." Ephraim's heart seized. Behind him, the twins fell silent, their sanding blocks forgotten. "There seems to be some confusion regarding their placement," Harrison continued. "These children were meant for the Orphan train heading east. Their transfer was legally arranged before your intervention at the trading post." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Best to handle this peaceful-like, Stoltzfus." "They are my daughters now," Ephraim said firmly, though his voice wavered. "I paid fair and square." "$1 is hardly fair compensation," Harrison scoffed. "The railroad has obligations to suitable families back east who've already been promised orphan placements. We can't have local farmers disrupting the proper system." Susanna crept forward, gripping Ephraim's sleeve. "Da?" Her voice trembled. "You can't take them," Ephraim insisted, drawing himself up to his full height. "They're thriving here. They're my family." The sheriff's face softened with sympathy, but his words remained hard. "Law's the law, Ephraim. You've got no legal standing here." "Surely there must be something," Ephraim began. Harrison consulted his papers. "Given the weather and circumstances, we'll grant you 3 weeks' grace. But come February 1st, these girls will be placed on the eastbound train." He fixed Ephraim with a cold stare. "Any resistance will be met with force." The men departed, leaving Ephraim standing in the doorway. Behind him, Mary Beth began to cry softly, while Susanna stood rigid with fear. That afternoon, Ephraim hitched up his wagon and drove into town, the twins huddled close beside him. At the courthouse, he requested audience with Judge Holloway, explaining his situation in careful, measured words. "I'll need a formal petition," the judge said, not unkindly. "Written testimony from neighbors about your fitness as a guardian would help your case." Ephraim nodded, though his heart sank. Writing did not come easily to him, and many neighbors still viewed him with suspicion. He spent the next days visiting nearby farms and homesteads. Some, like the widow Chen who sold eggs at market, readily agreed to write letters supporting his cause. Others turned him away, muttering that he was fighting a losing battle. "You're just prolonging their pain," one rancher told him, bluntly. "Let them go east to proper families." Each night, Ephraim worked by lamplight, laboriously crafting his petition. The twins watched him with worried eyes as he struggled over each word, determined to prove his worth as their father. One evening, as he tucked them into bed, Susanna clutched his hand. "Will they take us away?" she whispered, her usual defiance crumbling into fear. Ephraim gathered both girls close, breathing in the scent of soap and wool. "I promise you this," he said, working to keep his voice steady. "I will fight for you with everything I have. You are my daughters, and I will not let you go without a battle." "But what if they make you?" Mary Beth's voice quavered. "Then I will follow that train east and find you again, Ephraim vowed, though his heart ached at the thought. But first we must have faith. God brought us together for a purpose. He sang them a hymn of comfort, one Anna had loved, until their breathing steadied into sleep. Then he returned to his petition, writing late into the night by flickering lamplight. His hand cramped around the pencil, but he pressed on, putting his whole heart onto the paper. Outside, wind moaned around the eaves like a thing in pain. Ephraim paused in his writing to offer up a desperate prayer. 3 weeks seemed too short to save his family, yet he had to believe it was possible. He had already lost one family. He could not bear to lose another. Dawn broke clear and cold as Ephraim hitched his horse to the wagon. He tucked a stack of papers inside his coat, along with a pencil and inkwell. The twins watched from the doorway, wrapped in thick shawls against the morning chill. "Mind the fire," he instructed, checking their warmth with a father's concern. "And remember your prayers." "Yes, Da," they chorused, Mary Beth adding, "Be careful on the ice." The wagon wheels creaked as Ephraim set out, his breath fogging in the winter air. Fresh snow blanketed the rolling hills, making each mile harder than the last. But he pressed on, first stopping at the schoolhouse where Miss Anderson was preparing for the day. "The girls have a quick mind for numbers," she said, dipping her pen carefully. "It would be a shame to see them sent away." Her signature flowed across his petition, giving him hope. At the blacksmith's shop, old Jake Harper paused in his work, hammer hovering over red-hot iron. "Them girls sing like angels at church," he observed gruffly. "Reckon they belong right where they are." His weathered hand shook as he signed, but the letters were bold and clear. Not everyone proved so willing. The general store owner shook his head. "Can't go against the county, Stoltzfus. Bad for business." Others cited similar fears or muttered about proper procedures. Widow Chen, tending her chickens in the bitter cold, didn't hesitate. "Family is more than blood," she declared, signing with a flourish. "Those girls bloom under your care." By midday, Ephraim's fingers were numb despite his thick gloves. He stopped at the Miller farm, where Samuel Miller considered the petition thoughtfully. "The law's particular about these things," he warned, but reached for the pencil anyway. "Still, I've seen how them girls look at you. That's worth fighting for." The winter sun was sinking when Ephraim finally turned toward home. His back ached from the jolting wagon, but the weight of signatures in his coat gave him courage. As he approached his farm, lamplight gleamed warmly through frosted windows. Inside, the twins had been busy. A lopsided pie sat cooling on the table, its crust unevenly crimped but fragrant with apples and cinnamon. Flour dusted their aprons and cheeks. "We wanted to thank you," Mary Beth explained shyly. "For fighting for us," Susanna added, her usual spirit softened by emotion. Ephraim's throat tightened as he hung up his coat. "You didn't have to." "We're family now," Susanna interrupted fiercely. "That's what family does." They gathered around the fire after supper. The remains of the pie, surprisingly tasty despite its appearance, cleared away. Outside, wind whispered through bare branches and stars pricked the dark sky. "Tell us about when you were little," Mary Beth requested, settling close to Ephraim's chair. "About your family." Ephraim stroked her hair, remembering. "We were 8 children, all told. Our farm in Pennsylvania wasn't much, but there was always room for one more at table." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Family isn't just about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your heart." "Like us?" Susanna asked softly. "Just like us," Ephraim agreed. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he builds families piece by piece, bringing lonely hearts together until they make a whole." Mary Beth leaned against his knee. But what if the railroad men take us anyway? Then we'll know we fought our hardest, Ephraim said firmly. But first, we'll pray. He knelt on the rough floorboards, and the girls joined him without hesitation, even Susanna, who had once refused. Their small hands clasped his calloused ones as he began. Lord, he prayed, voice rough with emotion, you gave me these daughters when I thought my heart was too broken to love again. Help us stay together. Give us strength for whatever comes. And thank you for teaching me that a father's love isn't about birth or blood, but about choice and blessing. Amen, the twins whispered together. Ephraim opened his eyes to find tears on their cheeks matching his own. He gathered them close, these precious girls who had transformed from strangers to beloved daughters in the space of a few short months. The petition might fail. The law might still tear them apart. But in that moment, holding his children by the fireside, Ephraim knew with unshakable certainty that they were already a true family, one forged by love, faith, and the daily choice to belong to each other. No piece of paper could make that more real than it already was. County Agent Horace Plimpton's boots clicked sharply on Ephraim's wooden porch steps. The sound made Ephraim's heart sink even before he opened the door. The agent's wire-rimmed spectacles caught the late afternoon sun as he adjusted his leather portfolio with precise movements. Mr. Stoltzfus, Plimpton announced, his voice clipped and formal. I'm afraid I have matters of grave importance to discuss regarding the twins. Ephraim's throat tightened, but he gestured the agent inside with careful courtesy. Would thee care for coffee? No, thank you. This won't take long. Plimpton extracted a document from his portfolio, unfolding it with deliberate care. We've located the girl's mother's last will and testament. She left explicit instructions regarding their guardianship. The twins, who had been setting the table for supper, froze at these words. Mary Beth's hands trembled as she clutched a tin plate to her chest. It seems, Plimpton continued, that legal custody was granted to Mr. Theodore Blackwood, proprietor of the Golden Nugget Saloon. He's already filed papers to claim them. The saloon keeper? Ephraim's voice cracked. But surely, Mr. Blackwood plans to have them assist in his establishment. Plimpton's tone remained neutral. He speaks of entertainment opportunities that could prove quite profitable. Susanna's face went white. No, she cried. Ma would never— The document bears her signature, Plimpton cut in. I'm afraid the law is quite clear on this matter. Ephraim steadied himself against the kitchen table. When? You have until tomorrow evening to prepare them. Mr. Blackwood is eager to take possession. That is, to assume custody. Plimpton tucked the paper away and straightened his vest. Good day, Mr. Stoltzfus. The door closed behind him with terrible finality. For a long moment, only the tick of the mantel clock broke the silence. Then Mary Beth began to sob, great heaving cries that shook her small frame. Susanna stood rigid, her fists clenched at her sides. "Da," she whispered. "Ma wouldn't. She wouldn't give us to that man. She knew what happens to girls in saloons." Ephraim opened his arms, and both twins rushed into them. He held them close, feeling their tears soak into his shirt. His own eyes burned as he stroked their hair, trying to find words of comfort where none existed. The Lord hasn't brought us this far to abandon us now, he managed at last. Susanna pulled back suddenly, her hand flying to her throat where a small silver locket hung on a worn ribbon. "Ma's locket," she said. "I just remembered. There's something inside." Her fingers trembled as she worked at the clasp. "She showed me once, but I forgot. There's a hidden part in the back." Ephraim guided them to the table, where the lamp burned brightest. With careful movements, he examined the locket's tarnished surface. His carpenter's fingers found a nearly invisible seam along one edge. "Here," he murmured, pressing gently. The back panel clicked open. Folded into a tiny square was a slip of paper, yellowed but intact. Ephraim's hands shook as he carefully unfolded it, smoothing the creases on the table's wooden surface. The handwriting was delicate but clear. If I should perish before my daughters are grown, it is my deepest wish that they be entrusted to Ephraim Stoltzfus, the kind Amish man who once aided me when our wagon broke down. His gentle spirit and strong faith would give my girls the home they deserve. This is my true and final wish for their guardianship. Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery. Ephraim stared at the words, scarcely daring to breathe. The date was from just 3 months before the girl's mother had passed. "You helped, Ma?" Mary Beth asked softly. "I remember now," Ephraim said slowly. "It was last spring. A broken wagon wheel out on the prairie road. I never knew her name, but—" "She said a kind man fixed our wheel and shared his lunch," Susanna interrupted. "She said he reminded her of our grandfather, how gentle he was." Tears spilled down Ephraim's cheeks. The Lord's ways are mysterious indeed. "What does it mean?" Mary Beth asked, hope trembling in her voice. "Can we stay?" "It means," Ephraim said, carefully folding the precious note, "that your mother chose me to care for you. This note, with her signature, it's a true declaration of guardianship. The law will have to honor it." Susanna threw her arms around his neck. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew you'd love us." "That I do," Ephraim answered hoarsely. "That I surely do." Dawn broke cold and gray as Ephraim hitched his team to the wagon. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air while he secured the precious locket note inside his coat pocket. The twins, bundled in every quilt they owned, huddled together in the wagon bed. "It's a full day's ride to the county seat," Ephraim explained, climbing onto the wooden seat. "We'll need to be strong." Mary Beth nodded solemnly, while Susanna clutched her sister's hand. The wagon creaked as it rolled away from their farmhouse, wheels crunching through fresh snow. Behind them, smoke curled from the banked stove, the only sign of the home they hoped to keep. The morning wore on as they followed the rutted road. Snow began falling again by midday, thick flakes that settled on the horses' backs and frosted the twins' woolen scarves. Ephraim kept one eye on the darkening sky, knowing they wouldn't reach the county seat before nightfall. "Da?" Mary Beth's voice quavered. "I'm so cold." Ephraim pulled the wagon beneath a stand of bare cottonwoods. "We'll need to stop soon," he said, studying the gathering storm. "There's a tavern ahead where travelers lodge. We can shelter in their stable for the night." The tavern appeared through the swirling snow just before dusk, a weathered 2-story building with lamplight glowing in its windows. Ephraim led his team around back to the stable, where the owner grudgingly allowed them space in a corner stall. "Ain't proper rooms for your kind anyway," the man muttered, pocketing Ephraim's coins. The stable was cold but dry. Ephraim spread clean straw for bedding and hung a lantern from a beam. He wrapped the girls in quilts and pulled them close against his chest, sharing what warmth he could. The horse's breath steamed in the flickering light. "Tell us a story," Susanna whispered, "like you do at home." Ephraim's deep voice carried softly through the stable as he spoke of Daniel in the lion's den, of faith rewarded and justice served. The twins drifted to sleep against him, their faces peaceful in the lantern's glow. He held vigil through the long night, praying for strength. Morning revealed a world transformed by frost. Ice crystals coated their wagon canvas, sparkling in the pale sunlight. Ephraim broke the ice in a water bucket so the horses could drink, then helped the girls climb stiffly into the wagon. They reached the county courthouse by early afternoon. The brick building loomed before them, its windows stern and official. Other wagons were already gathered. Townsfolk come to witness the proceedings. Ephraim recognized the saloon-keeper's flashy buggy with its brass fittings. Inside the courthouse, the wooden benches were crowded with spectators. Theodore Blackwood, the saloon-keeper, stood near the front in an embroidered vest, his waxed mustache curled at the edges. He smirked as Ephraim led the twins down the center aisle. Judge Matthew Holloway sat behind his raised desk, gray-bearded and imposing in his black coat. He peered at them over half-moon spectacles as County Agent Plimpton presented the case. "Your Honor," Plimpton declared, "we have here a matter of contested guardianship. Mr. Blackwood holds a legal will and testament from the deceased Mrs. Montgomery, granting him custody of her twin daughters." The saloon-keeper stepped forward, producing a folded document with a flourish. "Signed and witnessed proper," he announced. "The girls will earn their keep respectably in my establishment, serving drinks and entertaining the customers with song." A murmur ran through the crowd. Ephraim felt Susanna trembling beside him. "However," Plimpton continued, "Mr. Stoltzfus claims to have evidence of a later declaration of intent from the deceased." "Your Honor," Ephraim said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "The girl's mother left this note, hidden in a family locket." He withdrew the precious paper, now carefully pressed flat. "It names me as her chosen guardian." Judge Holloway accepted the note, studying it through his spectacles. The courthouse fell silent, save for the ticking of the wall clock. "This appears to be in Mrs. Montgomery's hand," the judge said finally. "The date is more recent than the will Mr. Blackwood presents." "Forgery!" Blackwood burst out, his face reddening. "That plain farmer could have written it himself. Where are the witnesses? Where's the legal seal?" The judge's stern gaze swept the courtroom. "Mr. Blackwood raises a valid point. A mother's written intent carries great weight, but we must have proof of its authenticity. Are there any who can testify to Mrs. Montgomery's wishes regarding her daughters?" Silence fell again. Ephraim's heart sank as he looked at the faces around him. Strangers, mostly, none who had known the girl's mother. "I cannot make a ruling without supporting testimony," Judge Holloway declared. "This court will reconvene in 3 days' time. If witnesses to Mrs. Montgomery's intent can be found, I will hear them then." His gavel cracked against the desk. "Until that time, the children will remain in Mr. Stoltzfus's care." Blackwood's face darkened with anger, but Ephraim felt the twins press against him in relief. 3 days. 3 days to find someone who could confirm their mother's wishes. He guided the girls back toward their wagon, mind already racing with possibilities. "Da," Marybeth whispered. "What happens now?" "Now," Ephraim answered softly, "we pray, and we search for those who knew your mother's heart." The morning after the court hearing, Ephraim sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. His mind churned with memories, trying to piece together any connection to the twins' mother that might help their case. The girls sat quietly nearby, picking at their porridge. Suddenly, Ephraim straightened. "The railroad laundry," he said softly. "Your mother. She worked there, near the depot." Susanna's eyes widened. "I remember. She'd come home with her hands all red from the washing." "We need to ride there today," Ephraim said, rising from the table. "There might be someone who remembers her, and her wishes for you both." Within the hour, they were in the wagon again, heading toward the cluster of buildings near the railroad tracks. The laundry was a long, low structure with steam rising from its roof vents. Women moved back and forth through the door, carrying heavy baskets of wet clothes to the drying yard. Ephraim helped the girls down from the wagon. Inside, the air was thick with steam and the sharp smell of lye soap. Several women looked up from their work, expressions curious at the sight of an Amish man and two young girls in their workplace. An elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Can I help you folks?" "I'm looking for anyone who might have known Sarah Montgomery," Ephraim said. "She worked here some years back." The woman's weathered face softened. "Sarah? Poor soul. I'm Martha Whitaker. Been running this laundry 20 years now. Sarah worked for me near 3 years before she passed." Ephraim's heart quickened. "Mrs. Whitaker, might we speak somewhere private?" She led them to a small office off the main washing room. The twins stayed close to Ephraim as Martha settled into a worn wooden chair. "These are Sarah's girls," Ephraim explained. "I've taken them in, but there's a legal challenge to their guardianship. We found a note from their mother naming me as their chosen guardian, but we need witnesses who can verify she meant for me to care for them." Martha studied the girls' faces. "You do favor your mama," she said softly. "Such a hard worker, your mother. Used to talk about you two all the time." She turned to Ephraim. "And she mentioned you as well, Mr. Stoltzfus." Ephraim leaned forward. "She did?" Martha nodded. "Oh, yes. Told me several times about the kind Amish man who helped her years ago when her wagon broke down on the trail to town. Said you shared your bread with her and her girls, helped fix her wheel. She never forgot that kindness." "I remember that day," Ephraim said quietly. "I didn't know it was their mother until now." "She said if anything ever happened to her, she hoped you might look after her girls," Martha continued. "Said she trusted you because you showed Christian charity without expecting anything in return." She straightened in her chair. "I'd be willing to tell that to any judge who asks." Relief washed over Ephraim. "Would you testify in court? The hearing is in 2 days." "I surely will," Martha said firmly. "Sarah was a good woman who wanted the best for her girls. I'll not see them go to that saloon keeper who's been sniffing around here lately." They thanked Martha and made arrangements to send a wagon for her on the court day. As they drove home through the afternoon light, the twins were unusually quiet. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Susanna spoke up. "Da, tell us about when you met Mama on the trail." Ephraim added another log to the fire, watching the sparks rise. "It was a hot summer day, about 4 years ago. I was hauling beams to town when I came across a broken-down wagon. There was a woman there with 2 little girls. You two, though I didn't know it then. One of the wagon wheels had split." "I remember being scared," Mary Beth said softly, "but Mama said God would send help." "She was right," Ephraim smiled. "I had some tools with me and spare wood. While I worked on the wheel, we shared the bread and cheese I'd packed for my journey. Your mother told me about working at the laundry, trying to make a life for you girls." "She said someone helped us that day," Susanna remembered. "A man who was different from others, kinder." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Ephraim said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even then, he was weaving our lives together, preparing a path none of us could see." The girls moved closer to him on the hearth, one on either side. The firelight cast their shadows on the wall. 3 figures merged into one family, brought together by an act of kindness years before. "Tomorrow we'll prepare for court again," Ephraim said, "but tonight let's thank God for showing us how he had a plan all along." Together they bowed their heads in the firelight, their hearts full of gratitude and hope. The county courthouse buzzed with tension as townsfolk packed the wooden benches. Judge Holloway sat stern-faced at his elevated desk, his gavel ready. Ephraim stood straight in his simple black coat, the twins pressed close to his sides. Across the aisle, the saloon keeper lounged with an arrogant smirk, his fancy vest gleaming with a gold watch chain. Martha Whitaker took the witness stand, her gray hair neat beneath her bonnet, her work-worn hands folded in her lap. The judge leaned forward. "You knew Sarah Montgomery, ma'am?" For 3 years, Your Honor, Martha said clearly. She worked in my laundry, honest as the day is long. And did she ever speak of arrangements for her daughters? She did, sir. Martha's voice carried through the hushed room. Many times she told me how she trusted Ephraim Stoltzfus above all men, said he showed her true Christian charity years ago on the trail, expecting nothing in return. She wanted him to care for her girls if anything happened to her. The saloon-keeper jumped up. Lies! That woman never said no such thing. Silence! Judge Holloway's gavel cracked. He turned to his clerk. Bring me the county property records from last year, Sarah Montgomery's deed of sale. While they waited, Susanna gripped Ephraim's hand. Mary Beth pressed her face into his coat. The clerk returned with a leather-bound volume, opening it before the judge. Judge Holloway studied the book, then the note from the locket. He held both papers to the light, comparing them carefully. The room held its breath. The handwriting matches perfectly, he announced. This note is genuine, written by Sarah Montgomery herself. He looked directly at Ephraim. Mr. Stoltzfus, the law respects a mother's written wishes for her children. By the authority of this court, I hereby declare you the lawful guardian of Susanna and Mary Beth Montgomery. A collective gasp filled the room, followed by scattered applause. The saloon-keeper stormed out, slamming the door. Ephraim dropped to his knees, gathering the twins in his arms as they burst into tears of relief. Thank you, Lord, he whispered, his own eyes wet. Outside the courthouse, neighbors surrounded them with congratulations. The blacksmith clapped Ephraim's shoulder. The schoolteacher smiled warmly at the girls. Even the stern deacon nodded in approval. Snow had begun falling as Ephraim helped the twins into their wagon. Martha Whitaker approached, touching each girl's cheek gently. Your mama would be proud, she said. You've got a good father now. They drove homeward through the swirling snow, the twins nestled against Ephraim's shoulders under a thick blanket. The wagon wheels creaked softly through the gathering dusk, carrying them toward home and their future together as a family at last. Fresh snow crunched under the wagon wheels as Ephraim guided his team home through the moonlit evening. The homestead's familiar silhouette emerged from the silvery darkness, the sturdy barn, the smoke curling from the chimney, the frost-glazed windows glowing with lamplight. His heart swelled. This was no longer just his house. It was their home. Inside, the twins helped him stoke the fire while he prepared a simple supper of bread and stew. They ate together, their faces still bright with the day's victory. Mary Beth hummed softly as she helped clear the dishes, while Susanna traced her fingers over the precious locket now hanging safely around her neck. Time for bed, girls, Ephraim said gently. They climbed the wooden stairs to the loft, their footsteps pattering like rain on the floorboards above. He followed with the lamp, watching as they changed into their nightgowns and settled into the wide bed he had crafted for them. Moonlight streamed through the small window, casting pearl-white squares on the quilt-covered bed. Outside, the snow-laden branches gleamed like spun sugar in the winter night. Ephraim tucked the quilts around them, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he smoothed the fabric. Der Herr ist my hurt, he whispered in Pennsylvania Dutch, then translated, The Lord is my shepherd. His voice grew thick with emotion. I never thought to have children to bless at bedtime. Mary Beth reached for his hand. We never thought to have a da to bless us neither. Susanna nodded sleepily. Guess the good Lord knew better than all of us. Ephraim knelt beside their bed, his eyes brimming. Thank you, Father, he prayed aloud, for bringing these precious daughters into my care. Thank you for this day's victory. Watch over us as we sleep. The girls echoed, Amen, as he kissed their foreheads. Soon their breathing deepened into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Downstairs, Ephraim settled into his chair by the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. For so many years, his infertility had been a source of shame, marking him as somehow less in the community's eyes. The whispers, the pitying looks, the cruel jests, they had cut deep into his soul. But now, watching the firelight flicker, he understood. God's plan had been larger than his pain. His empty house had been waiting for these two girls. His barren years had prepared his heart to love children who needed a father's devotion. Providence, not curse, had shaped his path. The church bells rang clear and bright that Sunday morning, calling the faithful to worship. Fresh snow blanketed the town, pristine and glittering. Townspeople gathered on the wooden walkways, greeting each other as they made their way to the simple white church. Ephraim's wagon approached slowly, the horse's hooves leaving neat tracks in the snow. He helped the twins down, each girl wearing a clean dress and neat bonnet. Their cheeks were rosy with cold and happiness. Standing straight in his best black coat, Ephraim offered each daughter a hand. They walked toward the church together, their boots crunching in perfect rhythm. Gone were the sidelong glances and whispered mockery. Instead, neighbors smiled and nodded respectfully. The deacon held the door, welcoming them warmly. Inside, the twins kept hold of Ephraim's hands as they found their usual pew. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the girls' bright faces as they sang the opening hymn. Ephraim's deep voice joined theirs, strong and sure. The man once pitied as barren now stood blessed beyond measure. A father, not by birth, but by the greater miracle of love. The congregation rose for prayer, and Ephraim bowed his head, giving thanks. His daughters pressed close on either side, their small hands still firmly clasped in his larger ones. In that moment of quiet grace, their family circle was complete. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.